Hello again, everyone. Another People Come First episode live. I'm your host, co-host actually, and one of the authors, Master Terrier Thwin Nichols, and we have a wonderful guest with us today, Dalia Feldheim. Dalia, I'm so excited you made it.
I'm super excited to be here. Last time I saw you was 4 a.m. when you joined the Humans First. So I'm happy it's a better time for you and excited to meet John and Jenny.
All right. Well, we're talking about another another chapter of our book. Just happen to have fun. People Come First, the new paradigm. And it's about open up. Interesting thought. Open up. What could that mean? Well, we have a very well known international author, Dalia Feldheim, and maybe she could talk a little bit about leading like a girl. What? Open up, lead like a girl. You're gonna have to listen, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, this is about to get interesting. Linda.
Hot topic, yeah. Oh yeah, hold it up again, Dalia. All right.
Don't be shy.
Dare to lead like a girl. I love it. And our book, People Come First, there we all are, is People Come First, the new business model, which is definitely a new paradigm there. We are evolving into a new paradigm where people, not sales, come first. Is your company surviving or thriving? And so Dalia's here to talk about how we get a company really thriving. So open up.
Being a corporate CXO and outstanding author, TED speaker. You're well known, madam. And we can't wait to listen to you, but we're going to get the rest of the crew on board here. John Chapelier is also with us, our co-author, as well as Jenny Langren. So we have Eastern Europe, Central Europe, and the Eastern Seaboard of the U.S. coming to you live, ladies and gentlemen. John?
Oh, well, I didn't realize that was an introduction. Thank you, Terry. I appreciate that. For me, open up is it's kind of I had in a keynote once I talked about, this is closed and this is open, and which would you prefer to see? It's a very simple understanding, but it is, to me, from an emotional standpoint, it's being authentic, and being authentic is, for most of us, very uncomfortable. And the thing that I've said a million times is all new behavior is uncomfortable. And so for us, we have to be willing to start the process of being uncomfortable. And authenticity and vulnerability are not things that you're just going to walk out the door and start being. You're going to try it, get feel uncomfortable, and you're going to try it and feel embarrassed. And eventually, you're going to try it and it's going to work amazingly well. It's the fist finally opening and being genuine and being welcoming, becoming the boss you always wanted to be, the parent or the family member or the whomever it might be, in whatever situation you might have. Being open is the key to connection to me, because it is being genuine and inviting people to come in genuinely. So that's my thoughts.
Yes, delightful. And
go ahead.
And here's our famous Jenny Langren, the last member of the four-person authoritarian group. Jenny.
Co-author, Jenny Langren.
Thank you, Terry. Yes, thank you. When I think of opening up, two aspects are coming in for me. And the first is to open up to be seen and to be known. And it just takes a lot of courage sometimes to be seen and to be known. And for me, the journey of getting there more and more has been about accepting myself first. To not need to live out of fear of being rejected or receiving the opinions of other people. And the second one is another angle that I get to work around a lot with my clients, and it's open up to be poured into, open up to receive in your life. and especially working with people who are experiencing burnout. And also from my own experience, life often is so much about performing, it's so much about service, it's so much about pouring into the world and giving. And like I like to say that writing and authoring is my exhale. And I think for all of us, we know what we like to create, what we like to give out into the world. And to open up is also to allow other people to give to us, to pour into us, to receive, to be complemented in a team, to allow other people to compliment me where I end, and to accept that and appreciate the juiciness of that culture that comes to life when we allow others to be that 20% to our 80 some days. So many different angles coming in for me. Dalia, I'm so glad you're here with us.
Thank you.
So are we. We'll give you a little bit of a start there. Dalia, maybe you can slide in with something. Something comes to mind about what we're talking about with open up to start the conversation.
No, I mean, I think I love kind of both the fists. I mean, this is kind of fear. This is love, right? Love is always stronger than fear. But how do we, when we're in a world of fear, bring in our love? And how do we bring in our vulnerability with boundaries? Because, that's also part of the elements there that we need kind of. Sometimes if we open up and then we get hurt and then we shut down again, right? So how do we open up while maintaining our boundaries? And I think that's the first thing to come to that comes to my mind. But it's really, I mean, when you ask me the link between open up and dare to lead like a girl, right? When people ask me, what is it, dare to lead like a girl? It really is a provocation, of course, right?
Right.
And, in 2014, I was lucky to work on the global Always campaign called Run Like a Girl, right? And, you ask a young girl what it means. She says, wow, it means run as fast as you can, right? But something changes during puberty and suddenly it becomes an insult. And, our goal then with that commercial that became kind of really iconic was to change the meaning of words. So my book is really, I believe it's time to reclaim the words like a girl once again, and this time in the world of leadership, right? So when I think about what does it mean to lead like a girl, it's we all have within us, and it's not about women versus men, right? There is learnings in the book about women versus men. We know we're in a crisis. It's not just a mental health crisis with COVID. We're in a major leadership crisis. Reality is that 87% of employees are unhappy in the workplace. 1 in 4 experience acute anxiety, right? We have the great resignation, the silent resignation. So we know we are in crisis, right? What I've seen and learned is actually during this crisis, it's those historically considered feminine traits that are more important than ever before, right? And my book there's one major research that I quote. I mean, Folkman and all in 2012 did research to try and understand how come we don't have more women in senior roles, right? Or women not as effective as men. And in 2012, they did this research and they found, surprise, surprise, women were as effective as men, right? But then the interesting thing is they repeated exactly the same research again in 2019, okay? So 7 years later. And this time they found that not only were women as effective as men, they actually scored better in 17 out of 19 leadership traits. Why? Because the world has evolved completely, okay, and is continuing to evolve. And in this world of remote work, everything that's going on, it's actually those, softer skills that are the power skills. And yes, it's empathy and intuition and teamwork. It's resilience, right? I laugh, I say, have a baby, then come to talk about resilience. But it's also kind of, results. And so there's this dynamic, right? Where the world is changing. The previous way of leading has crashed. We know maybe it was right for the 17 when we were kind of productive line and it was all about productivity. In today's world, we need agility, we need creativity. And that's where our soft skills, our historically considered feminine traits are more important. So it's really a provocation for women as well as men to dig into those historically considered feminine traits and lead from the heart. That's kind of what the book is all about.
Yeah, exactly. It's
well, John, go ahead.
Yeah.
no, I was going to say that the image before, to me, there are two emotions, and fear and love, and that's all. And everything else, everything on the good side of that is some sort of derivative of love, and everything on the negative side of that is some derivative of fear. You see angry people, they're fearful people. You feel people who are feeling less than, they're fearful. It all sort of generates from those two emotions, at least to me. And it's funny if you take that and then you begin to wonder, well, what is this person showing me right now? Are they showing me some sort of fear? What do I need to dig down into and find so that I can actually connect with them on a level? Is what they're talking to me about really what's bothering them? This is one of the issues associated with leadership and with coaching, is that, what you're being presented with may very well not even be close to the issue that's really at hand, and it takes time to get to the person to actually be willing to open up enough to admit to what the issue is, and then you can begin to help them work towards that. When my book came out in 2004, five, I mean, it was looked at like, men aren't going to do this. Love, forgiveness, gratitude. Oh my gosh, that's never going to happen. And the thing is that the thing that I have found over the years and years of traveling and giving training courses and speeches and stuff is that women get it and men need it. And that's the way it always has been. It's the guy's kind of looking like, what? I don't really. And I just say, try it. Just try it. Try it at home where you're comfortable and you're safe, and see if being open, asking how you could behave. How could I be a better husband? That's a question that'll knock your wife's eyes out of her head. How can I? Trust me, there's a lot that she would like to tell me. And ask your kids, how can I, it's just in places where you feel more safe. And all of a sudden you start getting feedback that makes some sense. And then you might be willing to try it in a place where you're a little less comfortable. But it's, small changes, practice consistently, create dramatic results. And so let's take some small steps, but they've got to be in a particular direction. And hopefully that's in a positive direction that leads us up to being more open.
Yeah.
I love that, John, when you're talking about attempting, would be the word, to connect with someone else, and maybe you're seeing anger and you're wondering, what's under that, and maybe like you mentioned, some most likely fear. And that takes me back to my special education teacher days. It's like, there's all this behavior. However, where is that really coming from? And my famous line when I worked in a psychiatric day treatment center with like ages 5 to 10 with pretty violent kids is like, what do you need? What do you want? And how can I help you? And that saved me a lot of black eyes. So getting underneath and not just assuming, we all know how that word breaks down, that what that other person is dealing with is just huge. So open up, to me, kind of leads into like kind of the area of trauma, and I know Dalia is quite the expert there as well. So opening up to our vulnerabilities and realizing that something really is going on with us, and we can become a victim of it, or we can take a step back. And I love your analogy you used on the High Vibe live conversation, Dalia, about the waterfall. So I don't know what's coming up for you, Dalia. Just like have at it, because you have so much knowledge there as well.
A waterfall.
It was cool.
Waterfall. I mean, I use that when we're sometimes in a tough situation. We're in the waterfall, right? The emotions are landing on our head. So I am angry. I am sad. And when we're at the waterfall, right, we're just getting wet. We're not able to do anything. And I always kind of use this analogy. And my favorite place in Singapore, where I lived for 10 years, was the Botanical Garden. And there's this beautiful waterfall, but behind it, there's a cave. So you can go in the cave and actually you're seeing the waterfall, but you're not getting wet. And that's the idea. Step behind the waterfall means the emotions are still there. But instead of I am angry, saying I have anger, I have sadness. And it enables you to say, right? Just as you said before, I have fear, and I can tell you, you talked about fear versus love. I mean, I think I was raised quite fearless. Okay. I never thought that, fear wasn't in my vocabulary. I kind of, quite a daring person, creative. I like to try new things. So my first 17 years with P&G, with Procter& and Gamble, was all about, I was encouraged to step out of my comfort zone, to be in the driver's seat, to kind of try new things, to lead with my heart, to come up with ideas. But after 17 years in a state of flow, right, as we know, where we're totally aligned with our purpose, I moved to a different company. And for 3 years, I actually encountered fear for the first time. I had a boss that couldn't have been more different than I was, that, not only appreciated my strengths, but actually mocked them. Right. So suddenly everything that you're about. So my creativity was too messy. Where's my process? Right. My passion for people was, you're too motherly. And I joked earlier, even my positivity was seen as too positive, and I got the nickname of Miss Kumbaya. Right. And fear crept in. And I kept on saying, I'll continue with my love, right? With my openness. And I learned that you can't, change someone that doesn't want to be changed, right? Or, I needed to learn my own boundaries, right, to protect myself. And I realized it took me 2 years to realize that I have this emotion called fear. And fear, I mean, there's so much research done on that in the workplace, right? It will deliver short term. So leaders that are more command and control, fear driven, will deliver. And that's kind of why it takes time for companies to kind of realize these bullies, or, in the workplace, because people will, but over time, half the leadership team changed over. I myself found that even writing an email, right, a simple email, would take me twice as long. I would check my numbers 17 times because I knew I would be mocked on it. Think about the waste of human potential, right? Creativity, I had to kind of, it was messy. It wasn't appreciated. And it only after the second year, where I went to an alumni event of my previous company, and I walked in and I'm like, oh my God, I have fear. How did this emotion, end up in my life? I'm not going to accept this, right? I was a frog in boiling water, and I need to jump out. And it's interesting because people say, what is courage, right? Courage is not about not having fears. Right. I have plenty of fears, imposter syndrome, fear of failure, right? I was a competitive gymnast, perfectionism. We all have our fears, right? But, courage is recognizing your fear, looking them straight in the eye and walking ahead anyway, right? So that's where, for me, the experience was, no, fear is holding me back, and I am going to go back to my strengths, because that's where, courage comes from, right? And that was a huge learning. It was almost, I had to kind of force myself to trust my heart, to trust my love, right? To trust my strengths, which is positivity and creativity and people, and to go ahead anyway. And I think that's where, you know, there, the courage is so important in my book. And originally it was the courage to lead like a girl. And actually Paul Polman, if you know, he used to be the CEO of Unilever. he was a boss of mine in P&G, and he wrote a recommendation in the book. And he actually told me something really important. He said, and I will just finish off with that. He told me, courage is probably the most misunderstood word in the business world, right? People think that it's, not having fear or walking ahead or making decisions that others don't. But the word courage actually comes from the French word cœur, which means heart, because the really courageous leaders lead from the heart. So that became, an important mantra. And that's where the open up fits to me, with Dare to Lead Like a Girl.
Wonderful.
Delightful. I teach, and it's in my chapter, part of the chapter of Open Up is you cannot give what you don't have. So if there's no love here, you can't give it. And if you do try, it's ingenuine. And, courage, we don't, we're taught to fear what courage could be. Courage is jumping off the cliff. No, it isn't. Courage is standing up and saying, we're not jumping off this cliff.
Yeah.
We've got a different way, that's courage. And when it comes from the heart and you're a heart-based leader, you're connected to your people. You have a message for them and they have a message for you, right? I don't care. When I was chief operating officer of one of my country clubs, I was just as excited to hear of a new lawnmower person, new ideas, what they thought about how we were cutting grass out on the fairways. I genuinely listened to them because there might be something there that they see that none of us see, the forest for the trees type of thing.
Yeah.
And my pros at different times, they would come up to me and say, why do you want to listen to this guy? He doesn't have any experience, blah, blah, blah. I says, you never know when he comes up with something that will change the way golf courses are done.
Yeah.
He sees the golf course in a completely different way, especially he doesn't play golf. John?
Get a different perspective. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Open up to receive a different perspective.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good bottom line on that one.
Yeah.
How about you, John? Anybody else?
Jenny's been pretty quiet lately. What are you doing down there?
Whatever happened to Jenny?
Kids playing in the house, so I'm muting. So I'm happy to share. As Dalia is sharing, what was coming in for me is I stayed so long in a destructive marriage, and I kept opening up to a situation that wasn't serving me. So the word that comes in for me is naivety, like what it's actually not, because the healing process for me was to begin opening up to myself. Well, I used to think that staying open to other people meant always understanding and overseeing disrespect. But the more I started opening up to myself, what Terry is talking about, to love myself first and respect myself first, I was not as interested in being around people who didn't and staying in situations that were not love for me or the other person. So it really does begin within. Thank you.
Thanks.
John?
When I was a young guy and building the first company that I had bought this was back in the hard hubris shell days. There was a very solid shell of hubris completely covering me. I had all the answers. I knew all the stuff. I'm this wonderkind, and I started buying into my own BS. And I bought a small house in a neighborhood that was a neighborhood right down the street from where I grew up. And it's one of those neighborhoods I'd always wanted to live in, kind of thing. And I bought a house, and I was single. And I hired a guy to help me with the yard work. And he was a much older guy. He was probably, he's younger than I am now, but he was probably in his 60s. And I was in my early 30s. And he is a retired master sergeant from the Army. And all of a sudden, I was learning humility. I was learning to invite other people into a conversation. I was beginning to listen to other people's opinions. And this is just sort of through osmosis of being around this guy. It was amazing. I mean, we became unbelievably deep friends. And as the company grew, I ended up hiring him to bring him in full time so he could be a part of the whole company and bring some of that peaceful wisdom that he had brought to me, because I had never experienced that. We talked before about, I sort of learned how not to do things. And what I was learning from Mr. Walker was how to do things, how to be a friend, how to give somebody feedback that's not positive and yet walk away from the situation without an angry argument or something else. And one of Susan's and my favorite pictures is having Mr. Walker at our wedding, and the three of us together. And every time I look at it, I mean, he's passed away 25 years ago, and every time I look at it, it just opens up my heart again to the person who began the cracking of the shell of hubris to allow a little humility in. And it's just these little things that happen to us over life, like Terry's, to the guy who cut the lawns. You never know. If you're open, you never know where the next miracle is coming from. And to me, they'll come around all the time if I'm just paying attention. And that's why I have willingness in the book as the very first step. Is when you become willing, you become open. So.
If I can chime in, I mean, both of you just raised two thoughts in my head. I mean, the first one on naivety, Jenny. When I decided to do my thesis. So when I left, right, the challenge in 3 years, I said to myself, what a waste of human potential, right? In one company, I was kind of totally performing the same person. I want to study. Research is research. And I did my, thesis and INSEAD. And I went and I actually interviewed some of my ex-colleagues. Okay. And, first of all, you see the power of mirroring a leader, the positive behavior, the negative behavior. Everyone there were great people. Okay. But we adopted, slowly, the whole atmosphere became toxic. And there was one guy, I really, really liked him. Okay. He was kind of one that I considered a friend, but he was very straightforward. And at some stage during the interview, we were talking about psychological safety and, care in the workplace. And he turns to me and he says, Dalia, I think you're naive. Who cares about anyone in the workplace? Psychological safety, really, I miss my numbers, I'm out. That's how the business world is today. And I kind of sat there and I said, wow, what a different philosophy, right? And in that world, delivering the numbers. And my boss sometimes used to say to me, you think I don't care? My care is you getting the maximum bonus every year. Okay. So that was care. And, I think about it often, this naivety, right? Maybe it was the old world of the 70s, 80s, where it was all around productivity, and productivity was all about the numbers only, right? But the world has changed. And I think that's where it's not naivety, it's adopting, right? If we're working from home, we cannot be command and control, because in China, they just invented the little mouse that moves around to show that you're active even when you're in the yoga or in the gym, right? So employees, if you don't trust them, they will find ways to overcome. So that was just sort of the first thought. And then the second thought about, cracking the shell. John, what a beautiful story. And how do you crack the shell? And, and the belief that any person can crack the shell, right? And I shared it also earlier, but when the TED came out, right, in 2019, it was kind of me kind of for the first time sharing the story, turning my pain into a purpose, mess into the message, trying to help. It was very kind of, it took a lot of courage to go there on stage and share the story. And when it came out, I got tons of comments, it was beautiful. Women that decided to take action. Men, I had one guy tell me that his favorite employee cried in the office the next day, and usually he would be really embarrassed. But, he heard my story where my first boss told me, tears it's a sign of passion and not a weakness, right? And passion is your superpower. So he had, an answer there. But the craziest call, and I told Linda and Jenny before, I had a guy in Australia call me to say, Dalia, I saw your TED Talk and I realized that I'm an asshole. What can I do? Right? And that's exactly the cracking on the shell. And as a joke, or not as a joke, but the first page in the book, I actually say, if you have an asshole boss that you want me to send, I'm sending free 100 copies a year. And people have written to me. And we have sent a few books anonymously, because sometimes it's just you're lacking the awareness, or you need that little trigger. Mm-hmm. And this guy, I won't mention his name, but this guy actually decided to try a different strategy and try being heart-led, right? And he was surprised with the results. So he was very effective before he got results, because we said fear. But then when he did the heart route, his results were so much better. And today he actually works with CEOs, right? And, CEOs that have a reputation of being assholes, and tries to crack the shell for them. And I think that's, this naivety of people first, right? But also this inherent belief that, yes, assholes are not born assholes. In most cases, they had some trauma inside and they have seen it work. And they say, okay, this is how it works, because fear leads to results. But it's kind of sharing the knowledge that, hey, actually love leads to better results. And it's more fun. So why don't you try it? That's kind of the approach.
Wow, thank you. That was profound and so on point.
Yeah.
We talk so much in this day and age, the young people. I'm 70, so there's a whole lot of younger people than myself. And it's encouraging, because these young people, they're not going to put up with that push you down mentality. They just walk away. Yeah. You're not doing that to me. Yeah. All right. Yeah. My parents didn't do it to me. You're not going to do it.
Their hearts are open. They're not going to even fight back. They're just like, see ya.
I've got power in my hands.
Yeah.
And they use it.
I'm so hopeful in that sense, because they learned there's only one strategy to a toxic environment, which is zero tolerance. What I tried with coaching and humor, it's, sorry, sir, you will not talk to me like that. Okay. I'm going to leave. Talk about you in Glassdoor until you're ready to have a respectful conversation. And I love the younger generation, the Zoomers.
Absolutely. And we're coming to the end here right now.
Thanks.
We're such good friends. It's hard to say goodbye anytime for any reason. And do you have any final thoughts for us today about Open Up? This was just such a great conversation.
Well, I think it's the open up with the boundaries that is really important, right? In the book, I talk about this kind of 5P model, right? It's the purpose, understanding your strengths. Because if you're in a tough situation, only when I was able to go back to my strengths was I able to succeed. It's the perspective we talked about, right? Stepping behind the waterfall so you can understand what's going on and act on it. So be proactive about your life. It's the third, the physical element, right? Because you can't pour from an empty jug. So how are you taking care of yourself, right? You can't say I love you if you can't say I, right? So that kind of element. It's the people, and probably we know from the science of positive psychology, the secret to happiness. If we only remember one thing out of today, it's proven. The secret of to happiness is people. The quality of our life is the quality of our relationships. So, if we're toxic bosses, parents, okay, if we don't have good relationships, we will not be happy and healthier. So the people is important. And the last one I talk about is positivity. And, when I studied positive psychology, I learned that, yes, being Miss Kumbaya is good for business. Okay. So it's really about not being happy all the time. It's really about giving ourselves the permission to be human, accepting negative emotions, right? And then looking for the post-traumatic growth, looking for, John mentioned gratitude, hope, giving, right? So this whole notion of leading from your heart, try it. And you'll be surprised. The results will be 10 times better. So looking forward to hearing your thoughts on the book and in general. And always a pleasure because we're not naive. Research shows that being people first brings better results, for business, for health, for well-being, for longevity, etc. So thank you so much for this important mission.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening in today. Leave your comments. We're watching, okay? And reach out to us on LinkedIn or other social media if you'd like to gain a connection and have a conversation. We'd be glad to have a chat with you and move on from there, Linda.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Dalia, for being our guest and for the beautiful work you're doing in the world with your book. Can you hold that up one more time? Yeah, man. I love it. And Jenny and John and Terry and I have the People Come First book. So they go together really, really well. So thank you again, Dalia.
Thank you so much.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen,